Maplewood was a neighborhood that felt forgotten by the rest of the world. In the daylight, it was a place of quiet struggle, with faded homes and streets lined with cracked sidewalks. By night, it became even quieter as its residents retreated into their modest homes, trying to rest before another day of trying to make ends meet. For Jamal Carter, this was the reality he knew all too well. Some kids dream of becoming astronauts. Others dream of escaping poverty. Jamal Carter, he stopped dreaming a long time ago. At 12 years old, Jamal was wise beyond his years. He had learned early on that life was no fairy tale, and that the world wasn't made for people like him. Born into a struggling family in the heart of Maplewood, he had grown up with a mother who worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Jamal watched his mom clean mansions on the other side of town, where people lived in luxury, while he and his mom fought to hold on to their small, crumbling apartment. He saw the wealth on one side of the tracks, but never felt he would get a piece of it. His mother's words rang in his ears every day. "Rich folks don't see us, baby. They only see what they want to see." Jamal had learned to accept that. The world was divided, and he was on the wrong side of it. People didn't look at him with the same eyes they looked at the rich kids from the other part of town. He saw it every day when he walked down the street, or when he saw his mom bending over to scrub the expensive floors in mansions where he was never invited. He was invisible to those who mattered. But Jamal didn't expect anyone to see him. He didn't expect a handout or sympathy. His survival wasn't dependent on anyone else's generosity. It was all on him. He had learned to be resourceful, to find ways to get by in a world that often overlooked him. His world consisted of quiet corners, dimly lit streets, and small victories. Getting to school on time, making sure his mom didn't work herself to exhaustion, and finding enough coins to buy a snack after a long day. Today was no different from the others. After school, Jamal walked home, taking the same shortcut through the train station. It was faster, and there were fewer people around, which meant fewer eyes on him. Most people passing through the station were either commuters on their way to work or the occasional traveler passing through the city. No one paid much attention to Jamal, and he preferred it that way. He kept his head down, walked with purpose, and avoided getting too close to anyone. His sneakers, worn and ragged, made soft, scuffing sounds against the concrete as he walked. He had to be careful of the cracks in the sidewalk, the ones that could make you trip if you weren't paying attention. He'd learned to navigate the station like it was his own backyard. The train tracks hummed with an energy of their own, a constant reminder of the city's pulse, something that moved, that wasn't stagnant like the world he knew in Maplewood. Jamal glanced up as a train whizzed by, its engine roaring with power, its passengers oblivious to the world they were speeding through. He couldn't help but feel a sense of envy as the train carried people away to places he would never go. It was a stark reminder of how small and confined his life felt sometimes. But Jamal shook off the thought. His world wasn't on the train, and he didn't have time to dream about a life he couldn't have. As he continued down the sidewalk toward home, he saw a few other kids from his neighborhood hanging out near the station. They nodded at him as he passed, but no one stopped to talk. Jamal wasn't here for socializing. He had a plan, a routine, and he was determined to stick to it. Jamal's walk was interrupted when he passed a small park bench, where a woman sat reading a book, oblivious to the noise of the trains. Her backpack rested beside her, and she looked like she belonged here, like she could afford to sit on a bench and read. Jamal noticed the contrast between them immediately. His backpack was tattered, his clothes a little too big, and his shoes, although well worn, had clearly seen better days. But he didn't stop to dwell on it. He turned his attention back to his walk, focused on getting home. But as he passed the bench, something caught his eye. The woman had dropped her wallet. It had slipped out of her bag and onto the sidewalk just behind her. Jamal noticed it immediately and debated whether he should keep walking or stop. He knew the right thing to do was return it, but the thought of walking away with something that wasn't his was tempting. He didn't have money. He didn't have much of anything. The choice was a simple one. Jamal had learned what mattered most in life, and it wasn't the material things you could steal. It was the dignity you carried with you every day. With a sigh, he picked up the wallet, turned around, and walked back toward the woman. As he approached her, he tapped her on the shoulder. She looked up, startled, and Jamal held out the wallet, his face calm but serious. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said simply, his voice steady. The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled, visibly relieved. "Oh, thank you. I didn't even notice," she said, grateful. "No problem," Jamal replied, giving a slight nod, then turning back toward his path. He didn't linger. He had learned that kindness didn't always require recognition, and some actions were meant to be quiet. As Jamal walked home that evening, he carried with him something that couldn't be seen in his worn shoes or old clothes, something that no one could take away. He carried the pride of knowing that despite everything, he was doing the right thing. Jamal's mind wandered as he walked home, the day's events playing over in his head. He was used to the monotony of his route, the same cracked sidewalks, the same buzzing city sounds, the same sense of isolation. But today, something was different. The train tracks he passed every day felt somehow more distant, more dangerous. The whistle of a train in the distance didn't bother him. It was just another part of the city's constant hum. But then, something broke his train of thought. His eyes snapped to the side, and his feet froze. There, sitting perilously close to the edge of the tracks, was a stroller. Jamal's stomach tightened immediately. The stroller wasn't just near the edge. It was teetering dangerously close, as if it was about to roll off. Inside, a 1-year-old girl giggled, completely unaware of the impending danger. She was happily chewing on a biscuit, her tiny fingers grasping at the snack, blissfully innocent to the world around her. But Jamal's heart raced as he looked around. No adult was in sight. No parent, no caretaker, no one. Just the girl, alone, dangerously close to the tracks. His breath caught. Something wasn't right. The stroller shifted slightly forward, rolling an inch closer to the edge. Jamal's eyes darted frantically. The tracks were vibrating beneath his feet now. It wasn't just a sound, he could feel the power of the approaching train coming closer. The horn blared, deafening and close. The train was almost here. People nearby began to freeze, caught in the shock of the moment. A businessman stood still, eyes wide but unmoving. A woman gasped, her hand hovering over her mouth, but no one moved to help. Instead, her phone was raised, capturing the scene, as though the world was simply a spectacle to watch. But Jamal didn't have time to wonder why they weren't moving. His legs were already in motion before his mind even caught up. Without thinking, he ran. His legs burned, and his heart pounded in his chest as adrenaline coursed through his veins. His feet slammed against the pavement, each step faster than the last. The stroller was moving quicker now, rolling steadily toward the tracks as if it knew the danger, and yet the baby inside remained completely oblivious. Come on," Jamal muttered to himself as he pushed his legs harder, closing the gap. The train's horn sounded again, deafeningly close. He could feel the power of it now, shaking the ground beneath him. The heat of panic filled his chest. The stroller kept rolling, faster now, slipping inch by inch toward its doom. The baby still smiled, completely unaware of the perilous situation she was in. Jamal's focus was razor-sharp, narrowing only on the stroller, on the girl who was counting on him. The world around him seemed to blur. The people watching, frozen in their shock, didn't matter. The businessman who was still standing there, stunned and paralyzed, didn't matter. The woman with the phone, capturing it all without moving a muscle, she didn't matter. Only the stroller, only the girl, and the seconds between life and death. He was so close now. The noise of the train grew louder, its screeching wheels on the tracks like a roaring beast closing in on him. His feet were moving faster, his body screaming for air, but he wasn't slowing down. The air felt thick, suffocating, but Jamal pushed through. With one last burst of energy, Jamal lunged forward. He grabbed the stroller in a swift motion and yanked it back from the edge. His body collided with the sidewalk, scraping his hands as he fell, but the stroller was safe. He had done it. His heart pounded, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he lay there for a split second, the baby still happily sucking on her biscuit, unaware of the disaster that was just averted. The train roared past, inches from them, the wind from the locomotive sending a powerful gust over Jamal's body. The world seemed to slow down in that moment, and then, finally, everything went silent. The people around him began to stir. The woman who had been recording the whole incident now lowered her phone, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. The businessman blinked, finally seeming to realize what had just happened. But Jamal didn't have time to feel relief. His eyes remained on the baby, still in the stroller, completely unfazed by the danger she had just been in. The calmness of the moment seemed surreal in contrast to the chaos that had nearly consumed them. Then came the screaming. Jamal didn't look up to see who was yelling. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heart as he struggled to stand, his legs shaky, his palms scraped and raw. He had done it. He had saved her. His breath was still ragged, his mind still racing with the adrenaline of the near miss. But the cries, the shouts, those were the sounds that filled the air now. Shouts of shock, relief, and a chorus of voices questioning how something like that could have happened in the first place. As Jamal stood there, his hands still shaking, he couldn't help but wonder. Why was he the only one who moved? Why did no one else step in, despite the danger? Why did no one else act? The questions swirled in his mind, but there was no time for them now. He had done what he had to do. The world around him was still in shock, but Jamal knew one thing. He had saved a life. That was all that mattered. He glanced one last time at the baby, now being scooped up by a woman who had rushed over from the crowd. And with that, Jamal turned and walked away, knowing that despite the chaos of the moment, he had done what was right. Would you have risked your life? Where are you watching from, and what time is it? Drop a comment below. The nanny's eyes locked onto Jamal, and without any regard for what he had just done, she blurted out in a trembling voice, "Oh, my God! What were you doing near her?" Jamal frowned, confused. "What? I was saving her," he protested. But before he could explain further, whispers began to spread through the crowd. A ripple of uncertainty passed over the onlookers, and Jamal's stomach tightened with dread. "No," Jamal said again, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had saved her, not done anything wrong. The words tasted bitter on his tongue as he looked around. Wait, what? No, I was just... But the nanny wasn't done. Her face was filled with fear now, her voice stammering as she glanced nervously around the crowd. I think he was trying to take her. The words cut through Jamal like a slap, and the gasps from the crowd were deafening. Jamal felt his blood run cold, his stomach dropping. The same people who had been frozen in place, doing nothing as the danger came barreling down on them, were now stepping back, eyes darting away from him. They had already made up their minds. The sudden change was jarring. His breath hitched in his throat as he tried to process what was happening. He hadn't even thought twice about the stroller, only the life he was trying to save. He hadn't been thinking of himself. But now the narrative was shifting in a way that felt all too familiar. Then the worst thing happened. A black SUV screeched to a halt on the street, tires skidding against the pavement. The doors flung open, and out stepped a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a sharp suit. His eyes were cold, sharp, unreadable. Jamal's chest tightened as the man scanned the scene with calculated precision. His eyes landed on Jamal, and in that instant, Jamal knew something had gone terribly wrong. The man's gaze was piercing, like he was sizing him up in a way that made Jamal feel like he had already been judged. The man didn't say a word, but the air seemed to thicken with tension. Jamal's heart raced even faster. His mind screamed that this wasn't happening. Not like this. Not after everything he had just done. The man was Richard Kensington. Jamal had seen his face before. He was one of the wealthiest men in the neighborhood, known for his hard-nosed business dealings and sharp, unapproachable demeanor. But seeing him in person, towering over the scene, Jamal couldn't shake the unease crawling up his spine. Richard walked over to the nanny, who was still shaking, still clutching the baby. He didn't even glance at Jamal, as if he didn't consider him worthy of a second look. His voice was low, but the force behind it was palpable. "Is everything all right?" Richard asked the nanny, his gaze flickering briefly toward Jamal before returning to the woman. Jamal stood there, completely exposed. The looks he was getting from the crowd made his skin crawl. The whispers were growing louder, and the weight of their judgment felt like it was bearing down on him. It was the same look he'd gotten his whole life, the look of suspicion, the look of disdain. He wasn't just a hero anymore. To them, he was a threat. The moment stretched on, and Jamal's heart began to pound in his chest. His mouth was dry, and the whole situation felt surreal. Here he was, trying to help, but now he was being branded as a criminal. He could hear the whispers, see the glances that told him exactly what they thought of him. "Sir, I'm afraid this boy was trying to take the baby," the nanny said, her voice shaking. I didn't know who he was or what he was doing. Richard turned back to Jamal, his eyes narrowing. "I see," he said coldly, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "I don't think we need any more trouble today." Jamal's chest tightened, and his hands started to shake. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The injustice of it all hit him like a wave. How could they be accusing him of something he didn't do, something that was the furthest thing from his mind? He had saved the baby, and now, suddenly, he was the villain. Have you ever been falsely accused? Have you ever faced racism? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. The air is thick with tension as the sirens wail in the distance, growing louder and louder until they come to an abrupt halt. The police arrive fast, too fast. Jamal's breath hitches as the officers step out of their squad cars, their eyes immediately locking onto him. Their hands hover near their belts, ready for any perceived threat. One of the officers, a middle-aged man with a stern face, steps forward. He doesn't even look at the nanny or Richard Kensington. His gaze is fixed on Jamal. "Sir, is this your daughter?" he asks, his voice hard and accusatory. Jamal feels the weight of the question like a ton of bricks. His heart pounds in his chest, his head spinning. He can already sense where this is going. He had done everything right. He had saved the baby's life. But they don't see that. They don't see a young boy acting out of kindness. They only see a black boy near a billionaire's daughter, and that, in their eyes, is suspicious enough. Jamal opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. His throat feels tight. He knows how this ends. He's seen it before, seen the way people like him are always the ones suspected of doing wrong, even when they're the ones doing right. Then, out of nowhere, Richard Kensington steps forward. The crowd holds its breath, and Jamal's body tenses up. The billionaire's presence fills the space, and Jamal feels the weight of the man's gaze on him. His heart races as he waits for the inevitable. But instead of what Jamal expected, Kensington speaks, his voice calm but powerful, carrying an authority that seems to make the very air around them shift. "That boy." Kensington starts, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling back on Jamal. The moment feels like it stretches out in slow motion. Jamal braces himself, fully expecting the words that will follow. He's ready for the worst, for the accusation, for the judgment. But instead, Kensington's words take a turn. "Just saved my daughter's life." For a split second, everything goes quiet. The crowd freezes. The tension that had been thick and suffocating lifts, just for a moment. Jamal's heart skips a beat and he looks up at Kensington, trying to process the words. His mind races to catch up with reality. The officers hesitate, unsure of what to do next, their hands still lingering on their belts, but no longer with the same sense of urgency. The nanny, who had been trembling with fear, turns even paler. Her lips tremble as she looks between the officers and Jamal, unable to process the reversal in the situation. She had accused him, painted him as the villain, and now the truth is out. She's caught in her own lie, and her face reflects the full weight of it. The officers, who had been ready to arrest Jamal only moments before, step back. The change in their posture is almost imperceptible, but Jamal can feel it. The space between them and him widens. They, too, now see the truth. What they were about to do, what they had assumed, was wrong. Jamal had saved a life, and now they have to reckon with that fact. Richard Kensington, still standing tall in front of Jamal, suddenly kneels down to his level. The sound of his knees hitting the pavement breaks the tension in the air. Jamal's eyes widen slightly, unsure of what to expect next. Kensington's face softens as he looks him directly in the eye, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, Jamal feels like he's being truly seen. His heart skips a beat, his breath catching in his throat. "What's your name, kid?" Kensington asks, his voice now laced with genuine curiosity and respect. "J. Jamal," he stammers, still trying to process the situation. His mind is a whirlwind of emotions, relief, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. He had done the right thing, but the world had almost twisted it into something else. Now, here he was, facing the man he had helped, who was treating him with respect and dignity instead of judgment. The crowd, which had been murmuring just moments ago, is now silent. The officers, no longer holding any tension, Look at Jamal with a mix of disbelief and newfound respect. The weight of the situation has shifted. The narrative has changed. Jamal is no longer the suspect. He's the hero. But even as the tension ebbs away, Jamal knows there's still so much more to unfold. The way things are changing, he wonders. What will Kensington do next? Will he trust a billionaire who up until now had been a stranger in his life? What happens after a moment like this, when truth and respect break down the walls of assumption and prejudice? What do you think he'll do next? Would you trust a billionaire? Keep watching. The crowd stands still, waiting. The air between Jamal and Richard Kensington is charged with a quiet intensity. Kensington, his expression thoughtful but firm, reaches into his suit jacket pocket. He pulls out a checkbook and flicks it open with practiced ease. The sound of the pen scratching across the paper fills the space, almost too loud in the tense silence. With a swift motion, Kensington writes a check, pauses for a second, then hands it to Jamal. The numbers on the check are more than Jamal has ever seen. $50,000. It's an amount so large, so far beyond what his mother makes in a year, that it feels like a dream, like something that's meant for someone else, someone with wealth, privilege, and power. Jamal looks down at the check, the numbers swimming before his eyes. This kind of money could change everything, could take away all the worries, all the struggles, for him and his mother. Jamal's heart races, his mind whirling. He's seen his mother work so hard, cleaning the mansions of people like Kensington. He knows how much she sacrifices every day, how exhausted she is at the end of every shift. A part of him wants to take the check, wants to accept the reward for his bravery. But another part of him feels something different, a sense of discomfort, of guilt, deep in his gut. He looks up at Kensington, the powerful billionaire who could make his life so much easier in an instant. But something inside him twists, a feeling he can't ignore. This isn't what he needs, not really. Jamal doesn't want charity. He doesn't want to be given money for a momentary act. He wants something more. He wants a future, a chance to prove to everyone, including himself, that he's capable of so much more than what others see in him. He wants respect. He wants opportunity. Without hesitation, Jamal hands the check back to Kensington, his voice steady but resolute. "I don't need money," he says, his eyes never leaving the billionaire's face. "I need a chance." For a moment, there's complete silence. The crowd, once full of murmurs, now stands motionless. Even Kensington seems to freeze, taken aback by the boldness of Jamal's response. The officers, the onlookers, and even the nanny, all of them watch the exchange, unsure of how to react. This isn't how they expected things to unfold. This wasn't part of the script they had written for a black boy from the wrong side of town. A child, standing tall in front of a powerful man, turning down money to ask for a chance instead. A chance? Kensington's voice is low, his eyebrow raised in mild surprise. He looks down at the check in Jamal's hand, and then back at the boy who had risked everything to save his daughter. A moment of hesitation lingers in the air, thick with tension. Kensington had expected gratitude, awe, maybe even a little fear. But not this conviction, this desire for something greater than a quick fix. "Yeah," Jamal replies, his voice clear, unwavering. "A chance to prove I can be more than just a kid from the wrong side of town." His words hang in the air, bold and powerful. He's not just asking for a handout. He's asking for respect. He's asking for the opportunity to show the world and himself that he can rise above the assumptions placed on him, to make something of himself beyond the boundaries of the life he's been given. The silence stretches on. Kensington stands there, his expression unreadable, taking in Jamal's words. He looks around at the crowd, who are also stunned by the boy's response. Slowly, Kensington nods. It's a small movement, but it's enough. "All right, kid. You've got a deal." The words hang in the air, and Jamal feels the weight of them. He's not sure what this deal will look like, but he knows it's the beginning of something new, something that could change his life forever. His heart swells with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but above all, he feels a sense of pride. He didn't just take the easy way out. He didn't let himself be defined by the poverty or the expectations others had for him. He asked for a chance, an opportunity to prove his worth. The crowd starts to stir, and a few people begin to clap, though it's unsure if they're applauding Jamal's bravery or the unexpected turn of events. The nanny, still standing off to the side, looks on in disbelief, as if the world she thought she knew has suddenly been turned upside down. Jamal doesn't wait for more praise. He turns, walking away with his head held high. The weight of the moment hasn't quite sunk in, but he knows this is only the beginning. As he walks away, the sound of the city around him fades, replaced by the steady thrum of his heartbeat. This is his chance to make something of himself, a chance that not many people like him ever get. Would you have refused the money? What would you have done? Drop a comment below. A week has passed since that life-changing moment, and Jamal stands before a gleaming office building, his hands slightly trembling as he looks up at the towering structure. The reflection of the city around him seems to blur in the windows, just as his own past feels distant. For once, he's not looking over his shoulder, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. Today is different. With a deep breath, he walks into the building, the hustle and bustle of the corporate world all around him. He's used to hearing the sounds of the streets, the hum of traffic and people's constant rushing. But now, every step he takes inside this new world feels heavier, full of possibility. He has a purpose now, something more than survival. This is no longer about dodging prejudice or being overlooked. Jamal is here because he made a choice that would set him apart, that would break through the assumptions others had about him. A chance to prove that someone like him, someone with no advantages, no name-brand upbringing, can rise above expectations and change the trajectory of his life. He steps into the elevator, pressing the button to the top floor. As the doors close, he pauses for a moment. His reflection is there in the glass, but now it's different. He doesn't see just a homeless kid from the wrong side of town anymore. He sees a young man filled with ambition who stepped up when it mattered. Jamal's journey isn't just about escaping the streets. It's about becoming the person he's always known he could be. As the elevator begins its ascent, Jamal's nervousness spikes, but only for a brief second. He's been in tight situations before. He's stood up to bullies, he's faced down prejudice, and he's survived in a world that often doesn't care. This is a step toward something greater. He has the chance to make a difference in a space that once seemed completely out of reach. The elevator dings, and the doors open to reveal the sleek, modern office space of Kensington's company. It's the type of place Jamal has only ever seen from the outside, through the windows of rich neighborhoods, or from the sidewalks where people don't take a second look at him. But now, he's stepping into it. Jamal takes a deep breath and steps out into the office, the floors gleaming under his sneakers. His heart races, But it's not from fear anymore. This isn't a world of suits and boardrooms that intimidates him. It's a world that he's going to navigate, just like he's navigated the hard streets before. With determination and the will to prove himself, Jamal knows that this is only the beginning. As he walks down the hallway toward the conference room, he recalls what he told Kensington that day. The billionaire had tried to hand him a check, a quick fix to his problems. But Jamal had refused. He didn't need the money. He didn't need a handout. What he needed was a chance to prove his worth, a chance to prove that what really matters is the strength within, the courage to act when others stand still, and the resilience to rise when life knocks you down. By the time Jamal reaches the door to the meeting room, he stops for a second, taking it all in. This is his chance. His one shot to show the world that the most valuable thing a person can offer isn't their background, their wealth, or their circumstances. It's their heart. It's their integrity. It's the decisions they make in the moments when no one is watching. And Jamal, at just 12 years old, has already proven that he's willing to stand tall for what's right. As the door opens, Jamal steps inside. His journey is just beginning. The future that once seemed impossible is now within his reach, and he's ready to take it on. I didn't do it for money, Jamal whispers to himself as the door closes behind him. I did it because it was right. His voice, steady and strong, carries the weight of all the moments that led him here, the moments of courage, the moments of defiance against the odds, and the moments of integrity that are now shaping his future.